you bring forth a very famous quote, which is that of Henry Kissinger,
right,
which says, control the oil and you control nations, control the food and you control the people.
Thanks to all who lent support when people threatened me with court. They tried to persecute me for the goodies I produce. One day I spliced a couple genes. I seen this vision in a dream. Isn't this the beauty? It came right to me. Control the whole world with just a little seed. Some people call it avarice, but I don't see the greed. Just try to understand. Try to understand. I don't want to take your land. My name is Monsanto. Mad scientist said loose. You want wicked? I got the whole kit and caboose. The trees and the bees are extinct. You gotta die. I got the food is genetically modified. Yummy, yummy, good for your tummy. Frankenstein, bovine, and make me mad money. I slice the lightning bug gene with bull semen, producing a beat to keep the whole world screaming. Just one caveat that you're not supposed to know. When the little baby calves drop out, their noses blow. I make the earth cry heavenly tears. Work with the Pentagon for over 70 years. Some people say I'm mad flagrant to foreigners and label me because I made the agents oranger. They just have said I'm gonna keep the yada rockin'. Hit them with dioxin and heavy metal toxins. My Terminator seeds are brighten up your darkest. They commit suicide right after harvest. Franklin foods, some people keep yelling. They don't want to consume the miracle I'm selling. Good for them, they have no choice. I thought they congressmen, they have no voice. Just a facsimile thereof. Don't it seem so real now? Show mad love. It's all been carefully constructed for you. Don't resist now, please, it's not much that you can do. Come on, farmers, don't try to resist. My GMO is windborne, all it takes is just a kiss. So try to understand, try to understand. Try to understand. We gotta have your land.
That was Payday Monsanto by No Monsanto. Welcome back to another edition of the Awake and Aware radio show. This is your host, Infinite Consciousness, commonly known as Jason. Please visit Awake, Aware, and Part of the Solution on Facebook and check out Freedom from Compulsions at www.freedomfromcompulsions.vpweb.com. If you would like to access the archive of all the past shows, please go to www.blogtalkradio.com/infinite consciousness. Last week we discussed taking a break and regaining balance. This week we'll be discussing the horrors of the corporation of Monsanto, who are the largest producers of genetically modified organisms. Most of the food that you buy at your grocery store is genetically modified food, primarily stemming from the corporation of Monsanto. Monsanto, when connected under a different name, were the largest biological weapons manufacturer for the U.S. military. Genetically modified foods have been linked to cancers, neurological damage, and sterility. In short, genetically modified foods are designed to genetically modify us. Genetically modified foods are chemical and biological silent weapons being used on humanity, which is linked to the mass culling. This is also why laws are being passed like H.R. 875 and the attempt of S510 that ban growing your own organic gardens in your own yards, and also why a propaganda campaign is being pushed to call organic food and herbal supplements dangerous, which is where Codex Alimentarius, which Obama has signed in, comes into play. The real truth about Monsanto. Monsanto was founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1901 by John Francis Queeny, a 30-year-old veteran of the pharmaceutical industry. He funded the startup with his own money and capital from a soft drink distributor and gave the company his wife's maiden name. His father-in-law was Emmanuel Mendez de Monsanto, wealthy financier of a sugar company active in Vieques, Puerto Rico, and based in St. Thomas in the Danish West Indies. The company's first product was the artificial sweetener saccharin, which it sold to the Coca-Cola Company. It also introduced caffeine and vanillin to Coca-Cola and became one of the company's main suppliers. In 1919, Monsanto established its presence in Europe by entering into a partnership with Gracer's Chemical Works at Zeffin Mar near Roban, Wales, to produce vanillin, salicylic acid, aspirin, and later rubber. In its third decade, the 1920s, Monsanto expanded into basic industrial chemicals like sulfuric acid, and the decade ended with Queenie's son, Edgar Monsanto, Queenie, taking over the company in 1928. The 1940s saw Monsanto become a leading manufacturer of plastics, including polystyrene and synthetic fibers. Since then, it has remained one of the top 10 U.S. chemical companies. Other major products have included the herbicides 2,4,5-T, DDT, and Agent Orange, used primarily during the Vietnam War as a defoliant agent, later found to be contaminated during manufacture with highly carcinogenic dioxin. The artificial sweetener aspartame, NutraSweet, bovine somatotropin, bovine growth hormone, BST, and PCBs. Also in this decade, Monsanto operated the Dayton Project, the later Mound Laboratories in Miamisburg, Ohio, for the Manhattan Project, the development of the first nuclear weapons, and after 1947, the Atomic Energy Commission. Monsanto began manufacturing DDT in 1944, along with some 15 other companies. The insecticide was much welcomed in the first against malaria-transmitted mosquitoes. The use of DDT in the U.S. was banned by Congress in 1972. Due to large part of efforts of environmentalists who persisted in the challenge put forth by Rachel Carson and her book Silent Spring in 1962, which sought to inform the public of the side effects associated with DDT. As the decade ended, Monsanto acquired American Vicose from England's Courtauld family in 1949. In 1954, Monsanto partnered with German chemical giant Bayer to form Mobe and market polyurethanes in the U.S. Monsanto was a pioneer of the optoelectronics in the 1970s. In 1968, they became the first company to start mass production of visible light-emitting diodes using gallium arsenide phosphide. This ushered in the era of solid-state lights. From 1968 to 1970, sales doubled every few months. Their products, discrete LEDs and 7-segment numeric displays, became the standard of industry. The primary markets then were electronic calculators, digital watches, and digital clocks. In the 1960s and 1970s, Monsanto became one of the most important producers of Agent Orange for U.S. military operations in Vietnam. Agent Orange caused an immense damage to health also for U.S. soldiers, not at least by genetic modification. In 1980, Monsanto established the Edgar Monsanto Queenie Safety Award citation in honor of its former CEO from 1928 to 1960 to encourage accident prevention. Monsanto scientists became the first to genetically modify a plant cell in 1982. 5 years later, Monsanto conducted the first field test of genetically engineered crops. Through a process of mergers and spin-offs between 1997 and 2002, Monsanto made a transition from chemical giant to biotech giant. Part of this process involved the 1999 sale of Monsanto of their phenylalanine facilities to Great Lakes Chemical Corporation for $125 million. In 2000, GLC sued Monsanto because of a $71 million shortfall in expected sales. In 2001, retired Monsanto chemist William S. Knowles was named a co-winner of Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his research on catalytic asymmetric hydrogenation, sorry about the mispronunciations there, which was carried out at Monsanto beginning in the 1960s until his 1986 retirement. Throughout 2004 and 2005, Monsanto filed lawsuits against many farmers in Canada and the U.S. on the grounds of patent infringement, specifically the farmers' sale of seeds containing Monsanto patented genes. In some cases, farmers claimed the seed was unknowingly sown by wind carrying the seeds from neighboring crops, a claim rejected in Monsanto Canada Incorporated versus Schmeiser. These instances began in the mid to late 1990s, with one of the most significant cases being decided in Monsanto's favor by the Canadian Supreme Court. By a 5-4 vote in late May of 2004, that court ruled that, quote, by cultivating a plant containing the patented gene and composed of the patented cells without license, the appellants, canola farmer Percy Schmeiser, deprived the respondents of the full enjoyment of the patent, end quote. With this ruling, the Canadian courts followed the U.S. Supreme Court in its decision on patent issues involving plants and genes. As of February 2005, Monsanto has patent claims on breeding techniques for pigs, which would grant them ownership of any pig born of such techniques and their related herds. Greenpeace claims Monsanto is trying to claim ownership on ordinary breeding techniques. Monsanto claims that the patent is a defensive measure to track animals from its system. They furthermore claim their patented method uses a specialized insemination device that requires less sperm than it is typically needed. In 2006, the Public Patent Foundation filed requests with the United States Patent and Trademark Office to revoke 4 patents that Monsanto has used in patent lawsuits against farmers. In the first round of reexamination, claims in all 4 patents were rejected by the Patent Office in 4 separate rulings dating from February through July of 2007. Monsanto has since filed responses in the reexaminations. In October of 2008, the company's Canadian division, Monsanto Canada Incorporated, was named one of Canada's top 100 employers by Medicorp Canada Incorporated and was featured in Maclean's News magazine. Later that month, Monsanto Canada Incorporated was also named one of Manitoba's top employers, which was announced by the Winnipeg Free Press newspaper. In January of 2010, Monsanto was named Company of the Year by Forbes. Through a series of transactions, the Monsanto that existed from 1901 to 2000 and the current Monsanto are legally 2 distinct corporations. Although they share the same name and corporate headquarters, many of the same executives and other employees and responsibility for liabilities arising out of activities in the industrial chemical business, the agricultural chemicals business is the only segment carried forward from the pre-1997 Monsanto Company to the current Monsanto Company. This was accomplished beginning in the 1980s. In 1985, Monsanto purchases G.D. Searle and Company. In this merger, Searle's aspartame business becomes a separate Monsanto subsidiary. The NutraSweet Company, CEO of NutraSweet, Robert B. Shapiro, goes on to become CEO of Monsanto from 1995 to 2000. 1996 acquires 49.9% of Colgene, creators of the Flavor Saver tomato, in April and another 5% in November. 1997, Monsanto spins off its industrial, chemical, and fiber divisions into Solutia Incorporated. This transfers the financial liability related to the production and contamination from PCBs at the Illinois and Alabama plants. In January, Monsanto announces the purchase of Holden's Foundation Seeds, a privately held seed business owned by the Holden family, along with its sister sales organization, Corn States Hybrid Service, of Williamsburg and Des Moines, Iowa, respectively. The combined purchases price total of $925 million. Also in April, Monsanto purchases the remaining shares of Calgene. 1999, Monsanto sells off NutraSweet Company and 2 other companies. 2000, Monsanto merges with Pharmacia and Upjohn and ceases to exist. Later in the year, Pharmacia forms a new subsidiary, also named Monsanto, for the agricultural divisions and retains the medical research divisions, which includes products such as Celebrex. 2002, Pharmacia spins off its Monsanto subsidiary into a new company, the new Monsanto. As part of the deal, Monsanto agrees to indemnify Pharmacia against any liabilities that might be incurred from judgments against Solutia. As a result, the new Monsanto continues to be a party to numerous lawsuits that relate to operations of the old Monsanto. 2005, Monsanto purchases Seminis, a leading global vegetable and fruit seed company, for $1.4 billion. 2007, in June, Monsanto completes its purchase of Delta and Pineland Company, a major cottonseed breeder, for $1.5 billion. Monsanto exits the pig breeding business for selling Monsanto Choice Genetics to Newsham Genetics, LC, in November, divesting itself of any and all swine-related patents, patent applications, and all other intellectual property. 2008, Monsanto purchases the Dutch seed De Ruyter seeds for $546 million and sells it Posilac bovine somatropin brand and related business to Elanco Animal Health, a division of Eli Lilly and Company, in August for $300 million plus, quote, additional contingent consideration. All right, let's talk about some sponsorships. Monsanto has been the corporate sponsor of many attractions at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. At Disneyland, they include Hall of Chemistry until 1967, Fashions and Fabrics through the years from 1965 to 1966, Monsanto House of the Future, 1957 to 1967, Adventure Through Inner Space, 1967 to 1985, and at Walt Disney World, they include the Magic Eye Theater at Epcot, Circle Vision 360. All attractions that the company has ever sponsored except for the Magic Eye Theater. Ironic, the Magic Eye, too. Think about that one. In the future, world section of Epcot were located in Tomorrowland. Monsanto was cited as one of the major sponsors behind this Svalbard Global Seed Vault in many websites, but not in the homepage of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Monsanto does share technology and patents with following companies mentioned in the referred document: the Australia-based Grains Research and Development Corporation and the Swiss-based company Syngenta AG Corporate Governance. Current members of the board of directors of Monsanto are Frank V. Attlee III, the former president of American Cyanamid, and former chairman of Cyanamid International, John W. Bachman, Hugh Grant, the chairman of Monsanto, Arthur H. Harper, Gwendolyn S. King, president of McDonald's USA, Sharon R. Long, C. Stephen McMillan, and former chairman and CEO of Sara Lee Corporation, William U. Parfait, George H. Poste, or Post, I'm not pronouncing all these names correctly, by the way, Robert J. Stevens, the current chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin Corporation. Former Monsanto employees currently hold positions in U.S. government agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the Supreme Court. These include Clarence Thomas, Michael R. Taylor, Ann Veneman, Linda Fisher, Michael Friedman, William D. Ruckelshaus, and Mickey Cantor. Linda Fisher has been back and forth between positions at Monsanto and the EPA, Environmental and Health Record. Okay, according to an anonymous 2001 document obtained by the Center of Public Integrity, Monsanto has been identified by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as being a potentially responsible party for 56 contaminated sites, Superfund sites, in the United States. Monsanto has been sued and has settled multiple times for damaging the health of its employees and residents near its Superfund sites through pollution and poisoning. In 2004, the Wildlife Habitat Council and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Environmental Performance Track presented a special certificate of recognition to Monsanto Company during WHC's 16th annual symposium. Monsanto is the largest producer of glyphosate herbicide through its popular brand Roundup. A report released in June 2011 linked glyphosate to birth defects in frog and chicken embryos at dilutions much lower than those used in agricultural and garden spraying. Phil Angel, Monsanto's Director of Corporate Communications, referring to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, explained the company's regulatory philosophy to Michael Pollan in 1998. Quote, Monsanto should not have to vouchsafe the safety of biotech food. Our interest is in selling as much of it as possible. Assuring its safety is the FDA's job. End quote. All right, many of Monsanto's seed products are specifically genetically modified to make them resistant to Monsanto-produced agricultural chemicals such as Roundup herbicide. In a study published in the International Journal of Biological Sciences, researchers applied a different statistical analysis on the raw data obtained from Monsanto and concluded that these GM corn, maize, varieties induced a state of hepatorenal toxicity. They suggested that the presence of the new pesticides associated with the inserted genes were responsible, although the possibility that this could be due to a mutation during the transformation process was not excluded. Monsanto was drawn into the genetically modified food controversies over the Pustei affair. Dr. Arpad Pustei's experiment suggested that it was the process of genetic engineering, not the presence of the inserted lectin gene, that altered the thickness of the gut epithelium in rats when fed genetically modified potatoes. In other words, it was the process of genetic engineering itself, not the presence of pesticides caused by the engineering, which caused the damage to rats. The publication of this study has resulted in much controversy. In June of 2007, Monsanto acquired Delta and Pineland Company, a company that had patented a seed technology nicknamed Terminators. This technology, which was never known to have been used commercially, produces plants that have sterile seeds so they do not flower or grow fruit after the initial planting. This prevents the This prevents the spread of these seeds into the wild. However, it also requires customers to repurchase seeds for every planting in which they use Terminator seed varieties. In recent years, widespread opposition from environmental organizations and farmer associations has grown mainly out of the concerns that hypothetical seeds using this technology could increase farmers' dependency on seed suppliers. Despite the fact that in 1999 Monsanto pledged not to commercialize Terminator technology, Delta Vice President Harry Collins declared at the time in a press interview in the Agri-Industrial Biotechnology legal letter, quote, "We've continued right on with the work with work on the Technology Protection Systems, TPS or Terminator. We never really slowed down. We're on target moving ahead to commercialize it. We never really backed off, end quote. Okay, Monsanto sparked controversy nationwide with the introduction of the bovine somatotropin, abbreviated as RBST and commonly known as RBGH. It is a synthetic hormone that is injected into cows to increase milk production. IGF-1 is a hormone stimulated by RBGH in the cow's bloodstream, which is directly responsible for the increase in milk production. IGF-1 is a natural hormone found in the milk of both humans and cows, causing the quick growth of infants. Though this IGF-1 occurs naturally in mother's milk is fed to their infants, it produces adverse effects in non-infants, behaving as a cancer accelerator in adults and non-infants. This biologically active hormone is associated with breast cancer, correlation shown in premenopausal women, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and colon cancers. A Monsanto-sponsored survey of milk showed no significant difference in RBST levels in milk labeled as RBST-free or organic milk versus milk not labeled as such. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, all of the all of the raw milk farms that are being raided. Raw milk is extremely healthy for you and boosts your immune system as opposed to pasteurized milk. Okay. According to the New York Times, Monsanto's brand of RBST, Prosolac, has recently, March 2008, been the focus of a pro-RBST advocacy group called AFAC, made up of a large dairy business conglomerate and closely affiliated with Monsanto itself. This group has engaged in large-scale lobbying efforts at the state level to prevent milk which is RBST-free from being labeled as such. As milk labeled as hormone-free has proved enormously popular with consumers, the primary justification for AFAC for their efforts has been that RBST is approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration and that the popularity of milk sold without it is damaging what they claim to be the right of dairy producers to use a technology that maximizes their profits. Thus far, a large-scale negative consumer response to AFAC's legislative and regulatory efforts have kept state regulators from pushing through restrictions that could ban hormone-free milk labels. Through several politicians have tried, including Pennsylvania's Agricultural Secretary Dennis Wolf, who tried to ban RBST-free milk labeling on the grounds that consumers are confused. The statement by Agriculture Secretary Wolf was reported by pro-biotech site Earth Friendly Farm Friendly, which elaborated on the issues of RBGH-RBST labeling. Quote, consumers are getting confused with the extra labels, said Pennsylvania AG Secretary Dennis Wolf. Quote, they deserve a choice, and so do producers, but from the standpoint of safety, all milk is healthy milk. Our milk is a safe product. The Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is not in a position to say use RBST or not. The key word is choice. Proposed labeling changes have been floated by AFAC lobbyists in New Jersey, Ohio, Indiana, Kansas, Utah, Missouri, and Vermont thus far. In October of 2008, Monsanto sold this business in full to Eli Lilly for a price of $300 million plus additional considerations. All right, let's talk about Monsanto taking over the world's seed supply. All right, this was a Natural News article that I'm going to put in the middle of this show tonight. He who controls the seed controls the food supply, and he who controls the food supply controls the world. There is no question that Monsanto is on a mission to monopolize the conventional seed market. In fact, they are steadfastly working toward the goal of creating a world where 100% of all commercial seeds are genetically modified and patented, basically a world where natural seeds are extinct. Unfortunately for the global community, Monsanto is accomplishing their purpose. They currently own 90% of the world's patents for GMO seed, including cotton, soybeans, sugar beets, and canola. Yep, the creators of chemicals that will go down in history for their toxicity and horrific side effects is attempting to take over the world's seed supply. Ask yourself, do you really want companies such as Bass, Bayer, DuPont, Syngenta, and Dow involved with your food? Sadly, to a large extent, they already are. These Monsanto chemical and GMO cronies all share genetically engineered traits, create the patented herbicides and pesticides that GMO crops require to thrive. Monsanto is infamous for taking advantage of small farmers, and with the advent of MOUs, they are doing so with governmental license. Countries like India, Pakistan, Australia, and New Zealand have all executed MOUs with Monsanto. MOUs, or Memorandums of Understanding, permit Monsanto to use publicly owned lands to create so-called demonstration farms, GMO breeding camps, which in turn, at least in the case of Rajasthan, are subsidized by the government. Monsanto literally takes farmers' seeds, creates genetically engineered copycat versions, and then retains all intellectual property rights. Dr. Vandana Shiva, executive director of the Navdanya Trust, an Indian organization committed to organic biodiversity, states that, quote, the MOUs will in effect facilitate biopiracy of Rajasthan's rich biodiversity of drought-resistant crops. By failing to have any clause that respect the Biodiversity Act and the Farmers' Rights Act, the MOUs promote biopiracy and legalize the great seed robbery, end quote. It is common knowledge that GMO seeds are much worse than conventional ones. As with all their agreements, Monsanto shields itself from any liability, so when Monsanto's promises of higher yield with less work ring hollow, when farmers' crops fail, or when mass suicides are committed because of the crop failure and spirit-crushing debt, Monsanto presses on with no worries. Farmers that sign up for Monsanto seeds of destruction find themselves hooked. Year after year, no matter what prices are being charged, they are dependent on GMO seeds for new crops because GMO seeds, the bastardized versions don't regenerate. Monsanto has no qualms about robbing farmers that don't play poker with them. As a matter of fact, it makes a business of it. Conventional and organic farmers in both Canada and the U.S. who have the misfortune of having lands that border GMO farms often end up with trace contamination in their crops, making them, if organic, unsuitable for sale. Monsanto actually uses this situation against farmers and files patent infringement claims that they often win. The result, farm owners are left with exorbitant legal bills and fines, often forcing them to shut down, clearing away Monsanto competition. In a savvy move for survival, a preemptive suit on behalf of almost 300,000 plaintiffs seeking legal safe harbor has been filed in New York. Monsanto's product has changed from poison to food, but it has held true to its history of violating the rights and health of people around the globe. Monsanto is 100% committed to the sale of their seeds of destruction, no matter what it takes. Bullying, infiltration of high government offices with company-friendly individuals, or intimidation. The organic movement has taken up the standard against Monsanto's machinations in court as well as through grassroots education and activist efforts. The organic revolution is Monsanto's Achilles heel, and its goal is a world without Monsanto. All right, the U.S. consumers have been given a false sense of security about the safety of our food supply. You may have heard the FDA and food industry claims that genetically modified GM foods are safe, properly tested, and necessary to feed a hungry world. Untrue. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are one of the most dangerous and radical changes to our food supply. These largely unregulated ingredients found in 60 to 70% of the foods in the U.S. are well worth the effort to avoid them. Many consumers in the U.S. mistakenly believe that the FDA approves GM foods through rigorous, in-depth, long-term studies. In reality, the agency has absolutely no safety testing requirements. Instead, the agency relies on research from companies like Monsanto, research that is meticulously designed to avoid finding problems. It's easy to understand the FDA's industry-friendly policy and regulations of GMOs when you see the revolving door between agency regulators and the companies they regulate. The White House mandate that the FDA, under the first George Bush, was to promote biotechnology, and the person in charge of developing the agency's policy at the time was a former Monsanto attorney who later returned to Monsanto as their vice president. I'm going to be going off live in about 60 seconds, but I will continue on for another 15 minutes. I'm going to finish up my blurb and rant about Monsanto, then I will take some phone calls in a minute. So please go to the website, blogtalkradio.com/infinite consciousness, in order to continue listening to the show after the live version goes off. Let me continue on here. The FDA has claimed it was not aware of any information showing that GM crops were different in any meaningful or uniform way from non-GMO crops, and therefore didn't require testing. But 44,000 internal FDA documents made public by a lawsuit show that this was a complete lie. The overwhelming consensus among the FDA's own scientists was that GM foods were quite different and could lead to unpredictable and hard-to-detect allergens, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. It turns out that FDA scientists who had urged superiors to require long-term studies were ignored. All right. Even though evidence of this apparent fraud at the FDA was presented at the Washington, D.C. press conference in 1999 with major media in attendance, the media didn't alert the public. In fact, most Americans know so little about this subject that only about 1 in 4 consumers even know if they've ever eaten a GM food in their lives, even though the vast majority of processed foods contain derivatives from the 4 major GM crops: soy, corn, cottonseed, and canola. All right. The biotech industry claims that the FDA has thoroughly evaluated GM foods and found them safe. This is untrue. Internal FDA documents made public from a lawsuit reveal that agency scientists warn that GM foods might create toxins, allergies, nutritional problems, and new diseases that might be difficult to identify. Although they urge their superiors to require long-term tests on each GM variety prior to approval, the political appointees at the agency, including a former attorney for the Monsanto, ignored the scientists' official policy claims that the foods are no different and do not require safety testing. A manufacturer can introduce a GM food without even informing the government or consumers. A January 2001 report from an expert panel of the Royal Society of Canada said it was, quote, scientifically unjustifiable, end quote, to presume that GM foods are safe. Likewise, a 2002 report by the UK's Royal Society said that genetic modification, quote, could lead to unpredicted harmful changes in the nutritional state of foods, end quote, and recommended that potential health effects of GM foods be rigorously researched before being fed to pregnant or breastfeeding women, elderly people, those suffering from chronic disease, or babies. How could the government approve dangerous foods? A close examination reveals that industry manipulation and political collusion, not sound science, was the driving force. Government employees who complained were harassed, stripped of responsibilities, or fired. Scientists were threatened. Evidence was stolen. Data was omitted and or distorted. Some regulators even claimed they were offered bribes to approve a GM product. There are only about 24 published peer-reviewed animal feeding studies on the health effects of GM foods. One study showed evidence of a damage to the immune system in vital organs and a potentially precancerous condition. When the scientist tried to alert the public about these alarming discoveries, he lost his job and was silenced with threats of a lawsuit. 2 other studies also showed evidence of a potentially precancerous condition. The other 7 studies, which were superficial in their design, were not designed to identify these details. And in an unpublished study, laboratory rats fed a GM crop developed stomach lesions, and 7 of the 40 died within 2 weeks. The crop was approved without further tests. Many industry studies appear to be rigged to find no problems. In the case of a genetically engineered bovine growth hormone, or RBGH, for example, researchers injected cows with only 1/47th the normal dosage before reporting hormone residues in milk. They heated the milk 120 times longer than standard to report the pasteurization destroys the hormone. They added cows to their study that were pregnant before treatment to claim that RBGH didn't impede fertility. Cows that fell sick were dropped from studies altogether. With soybeans, serious nutritional differences between GM and natural soy were omitted from a published paper. Feeding studies masked any problems by using mature animals instead of developing ones and by diluting their GM soy 10-to-1 with non-GM protein. There are no adequate tests to verify that GM food will not create dangerous allergic reactions. While an international organization developing test standards to minimize the possibility of allowing allergenic GM varieties on the market, GM corn currently sold in the U.S. has not been subjected to those tests and would most certainly fail them. One of these tests, for example, uses a test tube simulation to evaluate how long a potential GM allergen can last inside the digestive system before being broken down. Compared to the recommended international standards, however, one biotech company used a far stronger acid concentration in more than 1,250 times the recommended amount of a digestive enzyme to make the claim that their protein degrades too quickly to cause a reaction. The only human feeding trial ever conducted confirmed that genetically engineered genes from soy transferred to the bacteria inside the digestive tract. The biotech industry had previously said that such a transfer was impossible. The World Health Organization, the British and American Medical Associations, and several other groups have expressed concerns that if the antibiotic-resistant marker genes used in GM foods got transferred to bacteria, it could create a super diseases that are immune to antibiotics. More worrisome is that the promoter used inside GM foods could get transferred to bacteria or internal organs. Promoters act like a light switches, permanently turning on genes that might otherwise be switched off. Scientists believe that this might create unpredictable health effects, including the potentially precancerous cell growth found in the animal feeding studies mentioned above. The biotech industry says that millions have been eating GM foods without ill effect. This is misleading. About 100 people died and 5,000 to 10,000 fell seriously ill when they consumed the food supplement L-tryptophan. Only those who consumed the variety that was genetically modified became ill. That brand had minute but deadly contaminants that would easily pass through current regulations today. If the disease it created had not been rare and acute, with crippling and deadly symptoms, the GM supplements might never have been traced as the cause. Once discovered, however, industry and government covered up the facts and diverted the blame. Even the FDA testimony before Congress withheld vital information. For a summary of the L-tryptophan issue, there's so much information that you can find on this stuff, but let's move on here. All right. Milk from RBGH-treated cows contains an increased amount of the hormone IGF-1, which is one of the highest risk factors associated with with breast and prostate cancer, among others. Soy allergies skyrocketed by 50% in the UK, coinciding with the introduction of GM soy imports from the U.S. According to a March 2001 report, the Center for Disease Control says that food is responsible for twice the number of illnesses in the U.S. compared to estimates just 7 years earlier. This increase roughly corresponds to the period when Americans have been eating GM food. Could that be contributing to the 5,000 deaths, 325,000 hospitalizations, and 76 million illnesses related to food each year? Might it play a role in our national epidemic of obesity or the rise in diabetes or lymphatic cancers? In regards to obesity, ladies and gentlemen, most of your food now, instead of sugar, contains high-fructose corn syrup, which all high-fructose corn syrup contains mercury, which is the worst neurotoxin to enter the human body. Also, high-fructose corn syrup has been linked to obesity. All right. We have no way of knowing if there is a connection because no one has looked for one. One of the most dangerous aspects of genetic engineering is the closed thinking and consistent effort to silence those with contrary evidence or concerns. Just before stepping down from office, former Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman admitted the following, quote, "What I saw generically on the pro-biotech side was the attitude that the technology was good and that it was almost immoral to say that it wasn't good because it was going to solve the problems of the human race and feed the hungry and clothe the naked. And there was a lot of money that had been invested in this. And if you're against it, you're Luddites. You're stupid. That, frankly, was the side of our government was on. You felt like you were almost an alien, disloyal by trying to present an open-minded view," end quote. Contrast this with the warning by the editors of Nature Biotechnology, quote, "The risks of biotechnology are undeniable, and they stem from the unknowable in science and commerce. It is prudent to recognize and address those risks, not compound them by overly optimistic or foolhardy behavior," end quote. The biotech industry and the government have been foolhardily indeed, blinded perhaps by the baseless myth that GM foods are needed to feed the world. They gamble with their health and support their safety claims on obsolete or unproven assumptions. Accepting their vacuous assurances by eating these dangerous foods or serving them to your customers may likewise be overly optimistic or foolhardy. All right, please read the evidence amassed in the book Seeds of Destruction by Jeffrey M. Smith. The meticulously documented facts leave no doubt about a massive injustice. The topic is too important to put this off until tomorrow. There is so much going on in regards to our food. One of the best ways to attack the human immune system is through what we ingest and put into our bodies. Almost all your food is genetically modified these days that you buy in the grocery store. And it should be alarming that most of the food you buy was created by a company that was in direct connection to the largest biological weapons manufacturer for the United States military. You know, these are silent weapons that you will not be able to tell the initial effects until it's too late. You know, cancers, neurological damage, you know, immune deficiencies, all these different disorders, so many that you can just go on and on about from food. And they're trying to outlaw natural, organic food. They're suing and closing down and buying out organic farmers that can't afford the lawsuits, that can't afford the court cases. This is a very, very, very dangerous weapon. And this is a huge, Monsanto is just one of the numerous tentacles involved in the global agenda that is coming our way. But, awareness is their danger. Awareness is something that becomes very dangerous to them. And this is what we have to do. We have to be able to not only ingest healthy food, real food, true food, but we have to spread the word about this kind of stuff because it all links in with the chemtrails, spraying the aluminum and barium into the atmosphere, the poisonous neurotoxic vaccines with squalene adjuvants and thimerosal, mercury-based and aluminum-based chemicals, and all this other stuff that is completely destroying the human immune system, which is for the agenda of the calling. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the eventual agenda, it's not saying that they'll make their agenda. I'm just saying what their agenda is. We can stop this at any time, is to reduce the global population to 500 million people, as said by numerous people. And this is a huge part of this, if you want to call it an Illuminati agenda, the Zionist agenda, it's all interlinked. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. But awareness is our key, and awareness is danger to them. Keep in mind that when I was talking about my court case, when I was fighting a local court, I provided a whole bunch of information, which is knowledge. Knowledge and wisdom is power, as long as you got the right set of knowledge. I had a visit by the FBI because of the information. At my house, I come home from work with the FBI in my driveway. Why? Because I was providing evidence that was threatening their scam. So this is what we need to do. We need to really understand what we're ingesting. Start your own gardens, ladies and gentlemen, before it's all outlawed. As I said in the beginning of the show, S510 is something that they were trying to pass, didn't pass, but now they're wording it differently, so it's going to be passed through. HR 875, banning growing your own organic gardens in your own yards. Why is this? We're being told what we can put into our own bodies as far as food and nutrition. Codex Alimentarius. Codex Alimentarius, what's that do? It's something that is allowing extraction of proteins and nutrients from food where you can actually, which is part of the culling process, you can actually starve to death no matter how much food you eat because you're not getting the proper proteins and nutritional qualities from the food you're eating because the food is not only genetically modified, but proteins and nutrients are purposely extracted from these foods. Not to mention that it affects the human immune system and creates cellular dysfunction. What do you think cancer? Cancer is the second biggest. The first biggest killer, as we talked about before, is heart disease brought on by stress, usually by the illusion of money or the lack thereof. But the second biggest killer in the United States, and, I'm sure in many other countries too, is cancer. And there's been numerous cures for cancer, but it's been suppressed using THC in studies in Canada. Those studies disappeared, including some of the scientists. What about I forget his name now, but the doctor in Italy who was curing cancer using sodium bicarbonate to kill the candida, which is the fungus that cell walls build around to create tumors. His medical license was taken away because he was curing cancer. Cancer is a huge business, but it also interlinks into our the attack on our health, which is part of the whole culling process. Plant your gardens. Make some gardens. I made a garden myself. This year was my first garden I've ever had. But I'm going to tell you, it's kind of exciting watching you grow your own food, eating your own food. It's something that you really need to do. I'm trying to get linked up with a local dairy farm so I can get some raw milk myself. Spread the word, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm telling you right now the best weapon against people is food, what they put in their bodies. It also links in with the water that people drink and absorb through their skin when they shower, with the fluoride that's in the water. Remember, fluoride, I did a whole show on that if you want to go back to that one, is a massive neurotoxin from the aluminum plants and pesticide plants. It affects the pineal gland. It destroys us. Be aware, ladies and gentlemen. I got to go. I hope you have a great week. I love you, and please, please spread the word of all information presented. Look it up yourselves. Don't believe what I'm telling you either. Do your own homework, and I hope you have a great week. All right? Eat healthy, be healthy, refuse their poisons, and keep moving on. All right? peace, love, awareness, and truth. Bye, ladies and gentlemen.